Welcome CSE 235 to ex1 ServiceTable, and this is an informal kind of exercise just to get us started looking at HTML, CSS, looking at kind of a full site instead of just starting really building block wise. We're going to look at a full site and just explore HTML and CSS, look at some code, look at some content, look at some different areas that maybe we haven't discussed in other courses, especially the CSE 230, and just kind of open it up a little bit and get you looking around before we jump into forms, before we jump into JavaScript. So what you're going to do first under Unit 2 is you're going to go to this assignment, and you'll see this link here, and you can actually click on this link. But what I want you to do first is make sure you're logged into your Replit account. Now, you don't have to create a repel yet because you're going to fork a repel. So that's what you're going to do. I'm going to give you a repel to look at. So you're going to go here, but make sure that you're logged into your account. And you could click right on this. And what will happen is you will see it. This is what happens when I see your assignments. When you give me assignments, I look at all your code and I can fork it, and then it becomes mine. So what you're going to do is fork this. So you'll go over here to the fork button and just click it. And under XX, put your initials. Now I'm going to put CJ because I have this account called CJ Homa, and I'm going to fork this and give it a new name. So put your initials there and click on Fork Repel. And then it should come into your Replit account as a repel in your account and have your settings and everything set up the way you had it set up. And what you're going to have in here is an icons folder that'll have 3 images. It'll have an index page and a styles.css, and it's finished. Not completely finished, but it's finished enough that it's kind of has a start to it. It doesn't have all the responsive work done on it, but it has a start, and it's simple. So we're just going to look at it. And I did not create this. I modified it from something else that I found, but I did not create it. So we're going to explore it for things that I didn't do. I didn't set it all up. So what we'll do is we'll go over here and we'll open it up in a new tab. And I closed up my other tab, my main tab that was open, because I'm now in it now, so I don't have to have that other main page open. So this is what we have. This is the finished view here, and we have kind of a large green background. We have kind of a white panel, as it's called, and it's centered in the middle of the browser window. And as you get smaller, it'll start to scale a little bit. You can see the images getting smaller. The buttons are changing a little, and then eventually it gets to around 800 pixels, and it'll basically be in a column. It'll be in a single column that you can scroll up and down. And again, it's made to be viewed now on a mobile device so that you can scroll up and down and not right and left. So let's just take a look at this a little bit for what's going on here. Now, one thing I want to point out is when you're in here, when you're viewing the finished display of it, and you want to know, what is this? What is this heading? What is that? Now, I have styles for you. I have index for you, and you could look through them, and we are going to look through them. I'm going to move this over so we don't really have to do much with that, but I'll keep it there in case I need it. But remember to use your inspect. You can right-click anywhere on here. You can go on this thing and say, what's that thing called? And you can go inspect. And it's saying icons chainsaw. It's showing you the rendered size. I think if you go up here, if you go on this arrow over here, you can hover over different parts, click on them, and then you'll see your styles over here. I'm seeing there's a margin bottom. When I hover again, let me hover again. You see that orange? That's the margin below it. The blue is actually the image area, and the margin is that kind of orangish area. And it's showing me there's a margin bottom of 25 pixels. The max width is 100%, and it has a class of service image. Service-img. There's no alt there. It just says alt, but it's just empty in the code. Again, I didn't do that. There's also a service header, which makes sense. It's an H2. It says service-header, where it says tree service, and I imagine these are the same thing. That's service header. So they're using classes which are being reused. Service header, service header, service header. And then moving down, this thing, open up, click on it here, service features tagline. So this is a tagline, this is a tagline, this is a tagline. It's kind of giving you some information here. So it's good to get used to the inspector if you haven't used this, to really kind of look at things, even if it's just to look at color, look at font size. If you ever see a nice font, you can inspect something and say, what are they using? What color is that they're using? Down here I could see they're using FF7800. And then we have this. We have service features description. And you can check this out too, and you can see it's in all caps. We'll talk about that. There's also a button, service button. Now, it's actually not a button because there's no button element if you look down here. If you look down at the code, when we go down here for the service button, it's actually just an anchor. Now, it's an anchor. It's an anchor that's called service button. It has a class name service button. It has a border on it, green. It has border radius. Border radius gives it the round corners. It has a color of white. Color, remember, is font color, so it's the learn more that's showing up in there. Inline block, meaning it's showing up as a block element, and it's able to put some of this area around it. It's treating it like a block element. Sometimes you can't put certain margins around things when it's a inline element, but when it's inline block, you could treat it like a block, and that's what it's doing there. There's padding on it, 15 pixels up and down, 35 pixels on the right of that. There's margin on it. Remember, margin is outside of it. When you go to margin here, you can see there's margin outside, 25 on the top, 25 on the bottom. There's a transition, meaning when you hover over it, it's kind of a slow process. It doesn't change immediately. It's doing that in a couple seconds. The hover is changing to a lighter color, but it's kind of transitioning to that. So a lot going on here that you can inspect in here other than just going into code. I have the code for you too. So you could close this up and go into code. And let's just look at some things here. Let's start with the HTML. Let's just start right from the top. We know what doc type is. That's declaring that it's an HTML page. We're using the English language. Then in our head element, we have meta charset. Now what's that? UTF-8. I don't know. Let's say UTF-8. Now I think I explained it before as using symbols, but let's just see what that says. We can go into W3 Schools comes up first. And let's see what they say. HTML specification encourages web developers to use it. Well, that's good. We're using it. And it covers almost all the characters and symbols in the world. So it's allowing us access to all the characters and symbols in our page. So sounds like something we should do. I don't know if we have to really dig into it that much or explore all the characters, but it's something that's kind of built into our skeleton code of our page. So that's our charset. So I don't want to ignore some of these things. Even meta viewport. What's that? Just mention it has something to do with the viewport and it has something to do with the responsive. Not put meta viewport. Let's see what that says. And here's another great resource. Mozilla Developer. I think I have it in our documents and resources. MDN docs. We'll go in there and it has some description about meta viewport. And basically what it is, the viewport's the area of the window which can be seen. And it mentions mobile devices here, scrolling. And what's important, it says this mechanism is not good for pages that are optimized for narrow screens using media queries. So this kind of overrides media queries. So if there's a media query that it's never getting to that particular size, it's never getting small enough to kick in, whoever wrote the code, this kind of takes over and helps it a little bit. So it's usually recommended to be in there, and you'll usually see it to be in there. So it's meant for responsive. Now again, what do I mean by responsive? Well, I mean when it gets resized and it becomes a single column that shows up in a mobile device like a phone. Now this isn't set up perfect because some of our headings are getting small here and the images are getting larger. So we're losing our proportion to that. So that's something we'd have to go and fix. But that's what's happening with responsive design. It's responding to the device that it's in. We're just reviewing some concepts here, not digging in too deep, but just kind of exploring a page other than just putting, and here's an H1, here's an H2, things like that. So again, right-click, inspect when you have to. We have our HTML here. We have our body, and then the first thing in there is a panel. Now, obviously, this thing is a panel. It's white. It has rounded corners. Let's inspect it. Check it out. I think it has a name of panel, and there it is. There's panel. I'll click on it. You can hover over it and get some information about it. It's saying that hover over here and go on panel. And it is saying color black, meaning if there's any text on it, it will be black, but the other elements are colored themselves. The background is white. It has padding at the top and bottom. 15 on the top and bottom, 25 on the right and left. And then also you can go down here and see some of the styles for it. You see the CSS styles for it. I'll bring these up a little bit. Background color white, max width 960, width 100%, text align center, text transform uppercase. And some of these properties are really for the enclosed elements to inherit from panel, to inherit from its parent. And there's even border radius, 10 pixels. That's making that round corner on there. So that's the panel. And a couple things I want to point out here that's kind of interesting is, there's your panel, and let's look at the styles. Now, first of all, for styles, there's a reset that's in here, a public domain reset, which covers a whole bunch of HTML elements. Sometimes we'll do like a margin 0, padding 0 with a wildcard, the asterisk, and just do a reset like that. But this is a full reset with all these elements, and it's resetting a lot of different things here. Other than just margin padding, it's resetting lists, it's resetting font size, taking away borders, everything. So it's doing a whole lot of things here. There's even a reset here for HTML5 for any older browsers that can't read what article is and what section is. What it'll do is at least display it as a block or as kind of a general div if it doesn't recognize that particular element. And there's some other kind of resets here, even for tables, for lists. It's taking away the like bullets or numbers. If they show up, it's taking them away. It's resetting the line height to 1. We're not using any tables. Here's HTML box sizing, border box. I think we touched on that in 230, where basically it includes the size of a border in the width, so that if you add a border to something, it doesn't go over the size that you need when you're working with percentages. And then it digs into the kind of basics of the page here. Body background is green. So there's the background color. Now it's saying display flex. Now usually the way that works is it puts things in columns, but it only works for its like first child. So it's saying display flex. It's actually using flex to center this panel. And I've never used that before. I've always used margin auto to kind of center things up and down and center them in the middle. And I've always encouraged that. But they're using flex to actually center this panel, because there's even more flex. Then when you go in the panel's saying display flex. And that's actually setting up these things in columns. So there's two flexes going on. One is the body is making that centered using flex, and the other, the panel, is making the children inside it. These three kind of columns here show up in columns. And it's actually in a row, right, is actually what's happening. Because when you go into these, and that is actually row, it's actually confusing with flex. This is displaying as a row. This is displaying as a column. So that's the kind of the way it works. It's a little backwards because you think of these as columns, but when you say display column, it means this. And this means display row. And what are the elements in them? Well, let's look. Let's go back to inspect. I know you can't just look at code. You almost have to look at it visually here. So I'm going to look at these, click on this little arrow over here and go over here, and you can see that, it's div service. So service are kind of those divisions going on here. And if you go on one of the service, you can see all the styles for it. And we could even go here and look at service. What is service? Service just says bottom, border bottom. So there's not even a lot going on here with service, because there's all these elements inside. There's service image, there's service header, there's service features, there's all these things. And if you were looking through here saying, what the hell are they talking about? That's why it's always good to go here and kind of find these things. So always try to use this as much as you can. And what I'm going to do, other than just kind of boring you with a lot of going through this and looking at things, I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of questions about this so you could explore it yourself and get you to kind of go through the inspector a little bit down here, and also to look through the code and even to change some things. The best way to find out what's going on, well, what's working with that? Why do I need that? Take it away. And then preview it and see, well, why is that happening? There's a couple things in here that I might think, well, like just for example, what if we took away this whole reset? What if we went here and we took away this whole reset? Now, I could delete it and then undo it, or you could do command /, which actually just comments it out. So that means it's not working right now. It's not going to be read as code. So if you go in here and close this up and reset it, just see what it does. And you can see it's throwing off the alignment here a little bit, so it's doing something, so it has some kind of effect on it. So it is doing some things on there. So I'll ask you to do some of that as well. So I'm going to go back here and I'll just uncomment that out now by doing the same thing, command /, and that's what I'll have you do. Go through some of that, change some of these styles, answer some questions on some of these styles, and then also give me a little feedback on it. So just to explore it a little bit, and then we'll do a little bit more with it. We'll be doing that. Look for more of this assignment coming up for ex1. We'll build on it a little bit before we get into forms and get into JavaScript.